In this Week 6 matchup, the New Orleans Saints and New England Patriots have a ton to prove.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints. I am Ross Jackson, and of course, Nick Cattles is here, host of Locked On Patriots. We're here breaking down the Saints and Patriots for you every single Monday through Friday, and here going to be taking a look at this big-time game on today's crossover Thursday. We'll take a look at how turnovers can be the deciding factor in this show, how big-named wide receivers could make things move all throughout, and why both of these teams came in with something to prove. We got all that coming up for you on this crossover edition of Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Crossover Thursdays are presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL so you can get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Nick, we have two teams here that are looking to prove a little something. What is the biggest story for the New England Patriots coming into this Week 6 matchup here in the Big Easy?
Ross, great doing this with you, man. Very excited to get this episode out there to the people. And I would say, can the Patriots follow it up? That's the biggest question for me, the biggest storyline. Like, I'm looking at it, and we all know what happened last week in Buffalo. Shocked a lot of the football world. They win that game against the Bills. The Bills had won 14 straight games at Highmark. And now you got to prove it, right? You can't get lazy. You can't rest on your laurels. You can't be fat and happy, whatever cliche, whatever saying you want to use. You don't want that to happen if you're the Patriots. This has to be a business trip, and they got to be ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, coming off of a huge win up against the Buffalo Bills, I saw you call it, what was it? One of the biggest wins in years, I think is what you called it, right?
Was.
Like, massive victory for them, 23-20 in that primetime game. And I think the Saints are kind of in a similar boat. They're coming off of their first win. However, their opponent was the New York Giants, not nearly as good as the Buffalo Bills. The Saints had lost to the Buffalo Bills just the weekend before in week 4, but had looked like they were kind of hanging in there for a little while up until the latter points of the game, especially the roughing the kicker call that kind of took the wind out of their sails a little bit. A dropped touchdown to Brandon Cooks. So not really dropped, one that was thrown behind and he dropped it, right? Like a misconnection between Spencer Rattler and Brandon Cooks in that one. But, they had their opportunity there to potentially take a lead and they weren't able to get it done. Then they come back, they get a win up against the New York Giants. They force 5 consecutive turnovers for the first time in the NFL since 2016 that a team did that. And now they got to prove that it wasn't all a fluke. Like all of it is like, well, and I'm sure you're hearing this a lot too. A lot of it is like, did the Saints win or did the Giants lose? And I'm sure you hear a lot of that is, did the Patriots win or did the Bills lose? And so I think both these teams have something to prove here. By the way, I thought the Patriots won. I thought the Patriots won, the Bills lost.
I think the Patriots played the cleaner game, so I would say they won. But, watching the Saints-Giants game from this week, it reminded me of the Patriots-Steelers game from a couple of weeks ago when the Patriots, they turned the ball over 5 times. It's just kind of a nightmare. And, I thought the Saints missed on some opportunities. That game should have been a blowout for New Orleans, but they missed some opportunities. But for the Patriots, Ross, it's about handling expectations now. I think when you look at the Saints, you say, all right, as you just mentioned, they beat the Giants. Good win for them. Any win this season is good. I think if you're a Saints fan, right, given the expectations. But now the Patriots, it feels like their expectations have really risen because of what happened last weekend. And now instead of, they could be a fun little story who might scare some decent teams, now it's, wait a minute, is this a playoff team? How good can they be? And it's just the handling of those expectations, especially, Ross, given that the Patriots they're one of the youngest teams in football. So how do the young guys deal with it? And I think Stephon Diggs, he made a lot of sense Wednesday in the locker room. He actually said that he thinks, now maybe this is just getting the message out, but he said, this week, could be tougher than last week because of those expectations. And sometimes it's difficult to meet those expectations when you're going against a team that has the lower expectation. So it's going to be fascinating to see how these guys handle it. And I'm fascinated to see how Spencer Rattler and company handle winning last weekend. And now they got to host a Patriots team that did what they did last weekend.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's not an easy challenge that's coming to town for New Orleans, coming off of the heels of their first win, which, by the way, was also Spencer Rattler's first career win. He had gone 0-10 before that. Kellen Moore's first career win as a head coach here in New Orleans. So a lot of firsts for this team, now looking to turn it into some seconds for this team. And they might get a little bit of help in getting that done. One of the players they have not gotten out on the field just yet throughout this season is defensive end Chase Young. And Chase Young was pretty good for this team last year, had over 70 pressures according to Next Gen Stats. He was within the top 10 around the NFL there. Only had 5.5 sacks, so finishing plays at the quarterback is going to be something to watch if he does make his way back out on the field. But it looks like that might be happening for the first time this season because Chase Young was back at practice on Wednesday. Now, he snuck into practice on Wednesday in front of the media, but he made his way. He's finally participating. And so maybe the Saints get a little bit of a jolt from that and coming off of their first win of the season, looking to stand up against a much tougher opponent in the New England Patriots.
You know, it's fascinating researching the Saints this week. And I told you before we started to record this episode that I've seen as much, if not more, of the Saints than any other team beside the Patriots, because I actually watched the Saints-Bills game getting ready for the Bills game last weekend. So what's fascinating to me about that defensive line is I think you've got some talent. I mean, there is some legitimate talent on that defensive line. I know, Devon Godshaw pretty well from his time in New England. Sure. Obviously, everybody knows Cam Jordan, who's going to be a television superstar when he's done playing football. But his ability on the field speaks for itself. And, you kind of just look at the guy that popped to me a little bit, and I'm sure I'll talk about this more on Friday's episode when I go solo with Locked On Patriots. But, when you look at Breezy and what he's doing, and, I thought he popped a few times against the Giants. He had this one spin move on the interior.
Dude, his spin where it was just insane.
It's just devastating. So, and now if you get Chase Young back, and I would even say this, when you're looking at Granderson, that's somebody who I thought played, very well against Buffalo. When I was watching the Buffalo game, I thought he stood out. He had a number of pressures. He made a couple of pretty impact plays from what I saw. So what's fascinating is you've got the talent, but then I look at the numbers and it's like, what's happening? Like the pressure rate isn't there. And it's kind of confounding to me that you look at the names and you look at the talent, but is it just inconsistency? What's going on with that defensive front?
Yeah, I think some of it is, maybe is a little bit of inconsistency. The other parts of it are just that it's kind of the way that Brandon Staley's defense just kind of has looked here in New Orleans. And that's why I'm so curious about the Saints getting Chase Young back and whether or not he can help to tick that pressure number up. Right now, the Saints pressuring at just 28% of their defensive snaps, according to our friends over at True Media. That's either 30th or 29th in the NFL. Not great, not where you want to be. And so being able to get some help there from Chase Young, especially going up against a quarterback like Drake Maye, who has been absolutely outstanding throughout the season. At one point for sure, the most accurate quarterback in the NFL, coming into a game, going up against a team that 4 of its 5 starting quarterbacks that it's gone up against so far, Nick, have a better than 70% completion percentage. And so getting pressure on quarterbacks is going to be a big thing, and it's been a big issue for New Orleans. Before we continue this conversation, we're going to take things over to our matchups because we're going to be able to dive into this a little bit more. We're going to switch things over to some of the playmakers, some big named wide receivers in this game with an opportunity to get things moving. We'll break all that down and get back to more pass rush talk and much more as well as we continue on with this crossover edition of Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends at Mazda. Mazda makes cars for those who do more than simply move, and they provide confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. You get into that smooth handling and the intuitive controls that can make any everyday drive feel like anything but the all-wheel drive that comes standard with crossover SUVs to make it so that you can feel comfortable and confident driving in almost any season. They make sure that they bring all that same level of intention to their vehicles that your favorite athletes do as well, from breathwork to footwork to those metallic accents and Napa leather upholstery as well. The fantastic craftsmanship that you can find over with a Mazda to take your driving up to the next level. Just like your favorite players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, everybody, continuing on with this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints, here to take a look at the matchups that will make this game. And I think, Nick, for both of us, a couple of wide receivers that are on the list for us. Why don't you start us off taking a look from the Patriots perspective? I know you got a couple of different matchups, but let's start with what maybe some of the Saints pass catching options might be able to, or what kind of threat some of these Saints pass catching options might be able to present.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look at the Saints and what they do offensively, and obviously Chris Olave doesn't have huge numbers when it comes to average yards per catch. He's more of a possession kind of guy now. But I look at it and I wonder, what is this offense for the Saints passing wise if you take care of Olave? And of course, the Patriots, to me, a big matchup here is how they're going to handle Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez. Now, last week against Buffalo, they deployed man coverage about 40% or so of the dropbacks from Josh Allen, which is, higher than what we had seen through the first month. And it's rather obvious to point out it's because you got Christian Gonzalez back. So, will we see even more man coverage? It's fascinating because I think the Patriots have some defensive backs that can do a decent job. Like I look at Rashid Shaheed and I say to myself, well, Marcus Jones can kind of stick with him as far as the speed element goes. And then I look at Olave and it's, well, do you put Christian Gonzalez on Olave and put Carlton Davis, on the opposite side? Do you put Carlton Davis against Olave? Do you feel like you need to help out at all in that situation? So I think the Patriots can make life difficult on Spencer Rattler if Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis are healthy and they play at their top level. I think they can do some things against this passing offense.
Yeah, and look, Carlton Davis is a guy that's got some experience against Chris Olave, formerly being here in the same division and everything too. So maybe there's something that goes there. I think the Saints wide receivers it kind of reminds me of what you said about the Saints defensive line. There's talent there, but the consistency and production hasn't been there. Right now, Chris Olave's 8.4 yards per catch is almost 2 yards shy of his career low already. And his, average depth of target is way below what it's been before and all these other pieces. And so there are some things that I think the Saints are just trying to massage, but the Saints offense in week 5 looked different than it did in week 4, which looked different than week 3, and so on and so forth. But it's going to be a challenge getting around that secondary of that well-coached secondary of New England's for these young wideouts. And therefore it will make life hard for Spencer Rattler as well. I'm looking at a wide receiver over there in New England as well. Stephon Diggs, what a game he had up against the Buffalo Bills. And the New Orleans Saints play a lot of soft zone. They give up a lot of completions. They surrender a lot of they play that bend, don't break style of defense, which does an awful lot of breaking. So I think that there are some things there that this Saints team has got to get right. They did a really good job adjusting, or maybe not even adjusting, but just executing at a higher level after the first 2 drives up against the Giants. When the Giants scored 2 touchdowns on their opening drives, they're not going to be able to give up that kind of hole up against a much better opponent in the New England Patriots. And so I think that becomes a big part of what the Saints are going to have to try to figure out. It's not only him, it's also Hunter Henry there too, who's had some games where he's had like 8 receptions for 90+ yards and things like that. Like, Saints are going to have a big time matchup in the passing game. And I think the passing game goes both ways for both of these teams in terms of how pivotal it's going to be in terms of limiting those opposing quarterbacks and, hamstringing as best as you can some of those pass catchers as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, I would look at Hunter Henry and Stephon Diggs, and it's a situation where it's not just the productivity, it's not just the final numbers. It's when these guys get involved. Yeah. They are the lifeline for Drake Maye. They are the security blanket. Stephon Diggs has had so many catches already this year through the first 5 weeks on 3rd down. He had a 4th down conversion in Miami. So Drake feels very comfortable throwing to him in big moments. And the same can be said for Hunter Henry. So if you can try to find a way not to maybe, completely shut the water off for those two guys for the Saints defense, if you can find a way to limit them, especially those third down situations. And Drake has been fantastic on third and fourth down, which is interesting because the Patriots have not necessarily been great on the early downs because their run game. But if you can somewhat limit those guys, especially when you're looking at third down, if you can do something to take away Hunter Henry and Stephon Diggs, well, then you leave Drake to try to find, a Kayshon Boutte, who's come up with some big catches, including one at Buffalo on third down last weekend.
Yep.
But I'm telling you, Drake Maye, when he steps back in that pocket, Ross, he wants to find Diggs. He wants to find Henry, especially when those big moments come up.
Yeah. Hey, question for you. Speaking of the run game, with Gibson out, are we expecting to see a lot more Travion Henderson? Because he was a fan favorite here in New Orleans when it came to the NFL draft class.
Yeah, I think a lot of people loved Travion Henderson, right? I mean, he had an unbelievable camp. The expectations were super high. I thought he was going to make an immediate impact, and it really hasn't played out that way. He's playing a little bit slow. He looks like a guy who's still trying to catch up to the NFL speed, right?
Sure.
For example, he was known as an absolutely nails pass protector at Ohio State. And when he was drafted, he was seen as the best pass protecting running back in the draft by most people. He really struggled in pass protection through the first month. He was a little bit better last weekend, but he's been late to blitzes. He's been late diagnosing stuff. There was a game, trying to remember which one it was, but he had 3 flags thrown on him. 2 of them were for offensive holding because he was just kind of head on a swivel situation, right? So he's playing a little bit slow. He's run into some piles instead of cut back, which tends to tell you he's not being patient enough because the game is speeding up on him. But you also have to acknowledge, Ross, that as the third back in certain situations, he's somebody who was not getting a ton of reps probably during the week. And I saw David Andrews, former offensive lineman of the Pats, talk about that this week. And so with Antonio Gibson out, Henderson might get more reps this week at practice, which maybe will slow the game down for him. But I would say overall, he's been a disappointment given the expectations that pretty much all of us had. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the Patriots handle the running back position. I still think Ramondre Stevenson will be the starter. I still think he gets the majority of the snaps. I still think Henderson will float around 40%, 45% of the snaps. And I think it's very likely that they elevate Terrell Jennings from the practice squad to fill that third running back spot. And the other part of it, Ross, of course, is Antonio Gibson, not just the running back, but the kickoff returner who had a house call against Miami. That's going to be a big impact because I look at the Saints special teams and I don't think they're very good. And can the Patriots take advantage of that? I'm not as confident without Gibson as I would be with him.
Yeah, sure. It's a great call out and great highlight there for sure. Cause that's been a big issue for New Orleans. Literally everything about what they do on special teams has been bad. Like there's been been no saving grace for them, except Blake Groovy had an awesome tackle up against
Look, when you're pointing out, and I know I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I'm well aware of Groupie. When you're pointing out Groupie tackles, that's probably not good for your special teams.
Right. Yeah. Something went wrong before that tackle. There's no doubt about it. You know what I mean? All right. What are the other 2 quickly just like matchups that you're going to be watching in this one that could decide the game?
Patriots defensive line against the Saints offensive line. I think that's strength versus weakness. Can the Saints handle Milton Williams and Christian Barmore, who have been really good, and Barmore is continuing to get better as he gets his legs underneath him after the blood clots last year.
Yeah, right.
So look, I think they could take advantage of that offensive line, especially on the interior. And the other one, Ross, to me is containing Spencer Rattler in the pocket. And, what I noticed, especially against, Buffalo, but even a little bit against the Giants last weekend, was some of these design run calls by Kellen Moore taking advantage of Rattler's legs. And linebackers, cornerbacks coming downhill, they've got to be responsible and disciplined against that kind of stuff. Don't give up those scramble conversions. And don't fall into the trap of some of the wildcat stuff that they throw out there every once in a while. I think the linebackers and the cornerbacks have to be responsible in this game, making sure that Spencer is kind of held in that pocket. Don't let him get going with those legs, because all of a sudden he could pick up some big first downs and who knows what happens.
Yeah, 100%. And now you're going to see Taysom Hill more and more involved in those design runs as well, who does that obviously very, very well. The only other thing that I would highlight that I think we're going to be watching out for is going to be the Saints running backs going up against that Patriots run defense. Patriots run defense does a really good job of not allowing a lot of yards after contact. When they get their hands on you, you're going down. But Kendre Miller has been one of the better yards after contact rushers so far this year, and has been one of the best that the Saints have seen since probably 2018 here in New Orleans, maybe even go back to 2017 on that. And so seeing how he might be able to help while Alvin Kamara dealing with an ankle injury that he suffered in practice. It's the third or fourth in practice injury that New Orleans has dealt with here this week. Or excuse me, not this week. It's not been that bad, Nick. It's not been that bad. But this season.
Like, what's going on at practice, Kellen Moore?
Right.
What are you doing to your guys?
Yeah, right. But so, that's something they got to get figured out. But it sounds like that injury is not super severe at this moment, but we'll see how things go, and maybe a bigger workload on the way for Kendre Miller up against that Patriots rushing defense. Coming up next, we're going to be taking a look at the things that each team needs to do to get a win, and surprise, surprise, turnovers are amongst the top of the list. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with this crossover Thursday edition here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode also brought to you by friends over at Gametime, the best place to go to buy last-minute tickets to your favorite events. The NFL season is now here, and so you're going to want to be able to take advantage of what Gametime has to offer, everything from zone deals to where you pick the section, they pick the seats. You can take a look at their Gametime guarantee, which you get with every ticket purchase as well. I pulled up Gametime to take a look at some different games that were going on, and in just a couple of taps, I saw some amazing deals. Talk about your favorite NFL teams for as low as $100, and in some cases, less than $100 if you're in the right markets. Remember, this is a New Orleans Saints and New England Patriots game that got flexed from 3:25 Central to noon Central. So maybe you weren't available to go and you are now, but it's last minute. Don't worry about it. You can download Gametime and they'll get you all taken care of. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use that promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Today's episode of Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends over at FanDuel, the best place to go to get in on all of the action when it comes to football weekends, whether that's the NFL or college football, odds lines, player props, same game parlays, live betting, and much more. You can find it all over at FanDuel. And that NFL season is here, so they're making sure that you're getting ready for kickoff each week with a can't miss offer, especially for new customers. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's it. All you got to do is pick a bet, put $5 down. If it hits, then you walk away and unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app over at FanDuel.com. You can get in on more when it comes to money lines, player spreads, or rather team spreads up against games. Like right now, the New Orleans Saints are 3.5-point underdogs at home with the Patriots favored 3.5. Maybe you like that going either way. And if you do, what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and download the FanDuel app today to get started. Let's get it, y'all. Wrapping up this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints with what each team needs to do to get a win. And so, Nick, I will open it up to you, buddy. What the Patriots win if what?
I'm going to say this again this week. I say it every week until I hopefully see it actually happen. The Patriots run the ball. If the Patriots can run the football, it'll make their offense that much better. What's crazy, Ross, is Drake Maye obviously playing like a top 10 quarterback through the first 5 weeks when you look at the analytics, the metrics, the stats. And that's with a one-dimensional offense. This team has been brutal running the football. They have not been able to do it. And I look at a Saints defense that is 29th in run-stop win rate. It seems like a matchup that they should be able to take advantage of, but I have felt that way multiple times this year, and they haven't been able to do it. So will they be able to run the football? If they can, then I think they can put up a good amount of points against the Saints defense.
Yeah, I think that becomes a really, really big one. The Saints 14th in the NFL when it comes to opponent rushing yards per attempt, 4.2 yards. Like they're an okay rushing defense, but I think in a lot of cases too, you got to think about how much in that Seattle game they were aided because Seattle ain't have to run nothing. They didn't have to do any of that. And so like you wonder how much the metrics are. And so, yeah, I think giving any kind of run game to the Patriots would be of grave detriment for New Orleans. Orleans in this game. I think for the Saints defense, it comes down to forcing turnovers again. This was a Saints defense that forced 5 consecutive turnovers last week, 3 straight fumbles, 2 straight interceptions, both by Kool-Aid McKinstry, which are interceptions 1 and 2 of his career. Was that the Saints being a takeaway machine, or was that the Giants being a giveaway machine, right? And so figuring out that literally one of them, Jackson Dart, just dropped the football and kind of handed it over to, so that one you can say was the giveaway more than a takeaway. But, you talk about Brian Brzee and what he's done, the punch out when he punched the ball out of Cam Scadaboo's arms, like that was a really solid play there, led to an 86-yard fumble return for a touchdown, so on and so forth. And so I think that's got to be one of the biggest things for New Orleans here, is going out there and showing that, they can be a ball hawking, takeaway driven defense, which would be a good thing for them to still be able to do while they're trying to figure out their pressure packages and how to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the turnover differential as well. You got a +2 against Buffalo. Major reason why you won that game in Buffalo. I mentioned the Pittsburgh game earlier in this episode. That was the downfall of the Patriots in that game. They should have easily won that game against the Steelers, but they literally gave it away. And as you mentioned, New Orleans was a +5, and you just look at last week, just alone what they were able to do. They were pretty much a net neutral, right, until last week, and they bump it up. So if you get extra possessions, you never know what's going to happen. And usually it means a lot of points. That wasn't necessarily the case last weekend for the Saints. They got all those turnovers. They didn't really convert all those turnovers into big points. I would not bet on them doing that again for a second straight week if they can get those turnovers again. I think an NFL team will be able to convert that. And the final thing I will say about this game is just the trenches. It's old school football. It's boring and all that stuff. I'm not gonna get too deep into it until my episode to wrap up the week at Locked On Patriots, but I do think this is a matchup that is conducive to the Patriots winning on both sides of the football in the trenches. If they can play at their level, and what I've seen from New Orleans and what I see from their analytics, they've struggled on both sides of the ball on the defensive line and offensive line. So I think if you win the trenches, then you can maybe get some push, get the run game going, protect Drake Maye, score enough points, and get out of there with a W.
Yeah, I think it's going to be huge for them. That's going to be huge for them for sure. I think the last thing that I'll mention for New Orleans going into this one is going to come down to Kellen Moore's offense continuing to grow. That 87-yard touchdown reception from Rashid Shaheed thrown by Spencer Rattler was a play that what was a tendency breaker for something the Saints started doing all the way back in week 2. And they did it again against Buffalo, and they did it again a couple of times up against the Giants. And then they flipped it on its head with that 13 personnel first down under center look, which they had run out of 6 times out of 6 before that, and then uncorked this big play action, bomb down the field, a 2-man route, half field read kind of a situation. And you need more of those types of things. You need more of those, like, hey, set this up a couple of weeks ago, cashing in on it. Got to be careful because you got to save some things throughout the season. But as long as Kellen Moore's offense continues to grow and continues to evolve, I think that's going to help the Saints stay in more games, because to your point, the Saints did not adequately score points off of turnovers. They were 0-3 in the red zone last week as well. And red zone offense has continued to be an issue for them. The play calling hasn't been great, and the execution has been lacking in some cases. And then you have an offense as a whole right now that's just not putting a lot of points on the board. For instance, last week on the fumble recovery for a touchdown, technically, the defense scored as many points off of turnovers as the Saints offense did, because the Saints offense had two field goals, and that was a a fumble return for a touchdown. And you know what? They got the extra point out of that too. So technically, maybe you could say that the defense had more points off of turnovers than the Saints actually did, 7-6. And so I think those are areas where the Saints are going to have to be able to be right if they want to end up leaving, not the Big Easy, but coming out of that game, leaving the Caesars Superdome with their second win of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Kellen Moore offense. It's a fun offense for me to watch. It's multiple. It's versatile. He does a number of different things. So it'll be an interesting challenge for sure if the Patriots can stay disciplined against some of the window dressing he likes to throw out there.
Absolutely. Well, look, if you want our predictions for this game, you're going to have to come back for another episode. Come back for the Friday shows over at Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints as Nick and I continue to break down this big time matchup going up at noon here in New Orleans, but should be a really great matchup and a fun one between these, much like how this was a really great crossover and a fun one between us, Nick. This was awesome.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, man. I enjoyed it an awful lot, Ross.
Looking forward to much more. And of course, make sure you come and check us out every single Monday through Friday over at Locked On Paints and Locked On Paints, Locked On Patriots and Locked On Saints. Locked On Paints is what the crossover is. That's what we're calling this one. We appreciate you very much for being here with us. Don't forget to go and check out more Locked On shows as well. We got you covered all around the network here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.